In anime, there are two main character archetypes. The first character archetype would be the static character whose personality remains mainly unchanged throughout the series. Slight signs of maturity may occur, but it's nothing so significant that I find worth pointing out. Typically, this archetype is seen in battle shonen main characters. The second archetype would be the flawed character with a clear path towards enlightenment, which would result in them becoming a better person. In battle shonens, these are often secondary characters who have been influenced by the main character, but in certain anime manga, often seinen manga, they can even be the main characters themselves. In this circumstance, their growth would be the result of their experiences and how they were influenced by the people around them. Often the second character archetype is more praised than the former. I mean, why wouldn't it be? There's just so much more room for character growth and exploration than the former archetype, and unless you are perfect like me, it's just so much more relatable for the average person to connect with a character who finds their own path towards goodness. So why would anyone even prefer the first archetype if its scope for creativity is so limited? The common thought process behind this decision is that we see these main characters as a beacon of light. And just like the characters that were saved by the morals and personality of the static main character, we too were saved by having our perspective shifted in a more positive direction. This is a fine reason to prefer the first archetype, but I think it goes a little deeper. Actions speak louder than words, a famous quote by the recent legend Sun Tzu. The meaning behind this profound quote is that if your words aren't congruent with your actions, then your words are meaningless, as everything you say is a lie. If you talk for talk, you have to walk for walk, and these shonen main characters talk a big game. The only way these characters can prove themselves is by being tested time and time again. The test of character is something so moving if executed well, and that's what we'll be talking about in today's video. Mob Psycho Season 2 Episode 5, the perfect execution of the test of character. Before we delve into this episode, I need to emphasize how good of a person Mob is. To be in Mob's position with so much power, most people would use them for purely selfish reasons, and the writers of the anime know this. There are countless examples of people manipulating Mob for their own gain. There's envy on Mob's powers from his own brother, and we have a direct example in Teruki Hanazawa, who has a substantial amount of power and used it to raise his status in school. Such enormous power can really influence a person, or maybe it's more correct to say that it shows who you always truly were. The best example of this that comes to mind is Light Yagami from Death Note. Kira isn't part of the first or second archetype, he's a secret third thing. It's like how there are two main genders, and then there are the they-thems or attack helicopters. They exist, it's just more rare. I don't know what I'm saying anymore, just let me go. The point is that Light Yagami is a main character who was given powers, and although at the beginning he made good choices about how to use his Death Note within the context of the law, later on in the show, like not even halfway through, he started making morally bad choices. It's easy to give in to your desires when nobody can stop you, which is why I find it so admirable that Mob still tries his best to improve himself, even though he has the option to use his psychic abilities and remove all of his problems. But as we soon learn in this episode, the choice to not use your powers for selfish reasons is a privilege. Even without his powers, Mob is surrounded by a group of friends that will always protect him. You don't want to mess with Mob, because that means you're messing with the Body Improvement Club. And let's not forget about how Ritsu framed Onigawara for slobbering over all the girls' flutes because he thought Onigawara was bullying Mob. So what happens when you take away all those crutches, with no powers and friends to rely on? This episode follows the life of Mob in an alternate reality where Mob has none of those crutches. Keiji Mogami shares many parallels with Mob. Both were blessed with immense spiritual power, both used their powers for good, and both questioned the ethics of why spirits were treated differently than humans. But the clear difference between the two is that Keiji Mogami became evil later down the line, after taking on underground jobs where he would kill people to pay off his mother's medical bills. His mother died and became an evil spirit, because all the bad deeds that Keiji committed ended up plaguing her. Keiji became an evil spirit, and this time he decided to use his powers for himself, instead of letting others exploit his talents. Keiji sought out those who brought misery and misfortune to others, and killed them. This brief recap of Keiji Mogami's life was necessary to go over, as Keiji turning towards evil and failing the test of character adds more depth and meaning to Mob going through this challenge, living in an alternate reality. If anybody knows how to break down Mob's perspective on life, it's going to be somebody like Keiji Mogami, who went through all that suffering, which broke down his own perspective.
あれ確か牛乳好きって言ってなかった。牛乳くっさ。
誰か後で雑巾かけておくように。
6 months of hell. This is where Sven Itachi forcing Sasuke to relive the memory of his clan, dying over 500,000 times. Okay, not that extreme. Mob in this world has no memories of his life with powers. This new reality is all he's ever known. A professional victim is what Mob became. His weakness of not being able to socialize properly had become much more apparent without his psychic abilities. He was moving like Kuroko, just blending into the surroundings. That is until this purple-haired demon called Minori Asagiri joined the Mob school. There are many reasons for bullying. People generally find happiness by socializing and indulging in their hobbies, but some twisted people get happy when they can mess with people weaker than them. Another reason for bullying is status. It immediately establishes yourself above everyone else. The latter reason is why Minori chose to target Mob, submissive and unproblematic. Mob was the perfect target for Minori to climb the social hierarchy. Step 1. Social isolation. First, Minori made Mob feel ostracized from the classroom by excluding him when she invited everyone to her mansion. This led to the class treating Mob differently, from ignoring him altogether to trying to make his life more inconvenient. And finally, physical assault. Demon Asagiri is perfectly capable of beating Mob. Anybody is. But like the modern reincarnation of Dio, Minori used her henchmen and jumped Mob while he was feeding some stray cats. They brutally beat Mob until he finally broke. Mob began to falter and let out all his negative emotions. His powers came back, and for the first time in his life, he was going to get even with humanity. He first used his newfound authority to aura form and force Minori to apologize. Even now, after all the abuse she put him through, he was still so kind that he only wanted an apology. Mob got hit from behind and fell to the ground. This was it. Mob broke his moral code. Mob turned the henchman into the throat goat and grabbed his neck till he passed out. Would the Mob have killed him? We don't know, because the thought from Rick and Morty arrived to snap Mob back into reality. Watching Mob choke out the henchman was honestly heartbreaking. It just shows that given the right upbringing and circumstances, anyone can fall into darkness, even if you have to push them to the very limit. Wimple noticed how far gone Mob was, and he made Mob remember his memories, his friendships, the body improvement club, Reigan, everything. And when Mob regained all his memories, he was grateful for all the people around him that had kept him safe till now. Keiji Mogami appeared and pointed out how Mob broke and gave into his desires in the end, talking about how good it must have felt to remove those who used him. The Shigeo you created in this world might give in to you, but this one won't, is what Mob replied. In the end, all Mob's good experiences overpowered his negative experiences. The battle between the two strongest psychics began. Mob still wanted to save Minori, despite everything she did to him in this world. Mob always thought these powers were useless and not important to anyone, but in this moment, he used them to save Minori. He wants to use his powers to uplift people so that they can change, because if Mob can change, then anyone can. The animation for this fight was insane. This may have been the best animated fight in the series so far. Usually when Mob reaches 100%, he's consumed by negative emotions, but this time was different because Mob was consumed with positivity. Mob transformed into his other form and exercised all the spirits. Keiji Mogami gave up and let Mob remain with his choice, saying he'll be watching from afar to see if Mob made the right one. But the most important part of this episode was Minori breaking down at the end and apologizing, showing that even if you are naturally as demonic as her, you can still change. The test of character for Mob in this episode was an illusion, because us without our experiences are completely different people. When Mob regained his memories, he realized he was able to change because of everyone around him. So if you are a good person with good people around you, be grateful, because it could have been a lot different if you went down a different path. But if you have a bad personality like Minori, then do not fret, my evil viewer. This episode shows that you too can change. That was the end of the video. Bye. I will upload faster next time.